Hello and welcome to Florida Basketball Hour. I am Neil Blackman, Saturday Down South. On this episode, Eric Fawcett, GatorCountry.com, is going to join me. We're going to get into Florida's big homestand, their victories over Georgia and Tennessee. Florida plays probably its most complete game of the season against the Volunteers after playing very well against Georgia as well. Obviously, three, conference games into the year. Florida now 2-1, very much still with a chance to accomplish what one of the goals was for many of the players that we talked to here at Florida Basketball Hour in the preseason, which was to win an SEC championship, something that hasn't been done at Florida in quite some time. I think the Gators, obviously really have a big week ahead of them. They're going to go to Oklahoma tomorrow night. We'll preview that game. All previews, as usual, brought to you by Game Time Sidekicks. And we'll talk about the Vanderbilt game. We're going to get into kind of whether Florida can carry this type of play out onto the road. Now, obviously, the big thing against Tennessee was Boogie Flan just playing a magnificent game. Actually, one of the higher-rated single games of the year if you go to Torvik. And I think all the more impressive because he missed his first three shots and was in foul trouble and didn't score until late in the first half, and then essentially takes the basketball game over. And there was a big response to that, both in the O'Connell Center and the building and on the Florida bench. If you saw the post-game interview that he did with Billis and Schulman, there was, almost every player on Florida's roster coming over and congratulating him. You could tell very much that this is a guy who is well-liked in the locker room, who's continued to work very hard. And, great moments for Boogie Fland. Hopefully more to come if you're, looking to have Florida accomplish those goals. But the bottom line is the Gators got a huge win. They're back into the AP Top 25 at number 19. Today, that with Florida Basketball Hour, we really don't care about polls very much at all. But I do think casuals care about polls somewhat. So I think when you talk to, your casual, Florida dropped out of the rankings, this team stinks. This is a take I saw on Twitter quite a bit. This team stinks. When in reality, really at no point in time have they stunk. They have 5 losses by 17 points. I do think, and Fawcett's been saying this a lot, at especially at patreon.com/Florida BB Hour. Make sure you subscribe to the Patreon. Best way to support the podcast, seriously, continues to be to subscribe to the Patreon. So make sure you go to patreon.com/Florida BB Hour and subscribe. But Fawcett was a guy who had defended Boogie Flan pretty consistently at the Patreon. And he needs to bang in some shots. But for the most part, he was defending at a high level. Actually, his passing and assist and care for the basketball had improved in the last few weeks and had been really good in SEC play. Leading up to the breakout performance against Tennessee. And look, with that Boogie Flan, Florida has a chance to be really, really, really good again. I think their ceiling is fairly high without that Boogie Flan. But it's sort of how close is the floor to the ceiling unless Boogie Flan plays really great. So we welcome in our guy, Eric Fawcett, Basket Under Review, GatorCountry.com, all those places. Eric, man, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Would love to get a little breakdown of your weekend at Disney. So maybe you got to do that at some point during the show for everyone to hear too. But you did bring me in at a good time to talk about Boogie Flan, because with every passing game, it seemed like my defensive Flan was only bringing in more doubters and haters. And which again, just before this game, taking this one completely out of it. And I do think that when you look at like what has made the Gators good this year, it's been their rebounding and their defense. Well, Flan doesn't really have any particular role in the rebounding necessarily, but he certainly plays a massive part of the defense. I think that was even on display again playing against Georgia, where Jeremiah Wilkinson was, really, really talented scorer, was just, held at 2 points on 1 of 9 shooting with a turnover. Like that was Boogie Flan. Bring it to Tennessee. Even then I thought, Jacoby Gillespie, who's a fantastic player that many people would probably hope is in orange and blue, and still would love to see him in orange and blue. Even despite his game, he was neutralized. Now he didn't, not like he had a terrible game. He had 12 points, but a couple of those came in transition. A couple of those came in garbage time when he was guarded by Boogie Flan. Flan really neutralized him. So I just thought while he was getting crucified on Twitter and crucified by a lot of media types, getting put on lists of like most overrated transfers in the country, like let's be honest, even with how he was performing when I was defending him, he certainly was not playing up to the caliber that he was getting paid to be, quite frankly. He was not, Florida was still not getting positive value. Like, let's be clear. I just thought he was playing much better than people thought and was contributing to a lot that is good. And something else I brought to the Patreon a little while ago was the fact that the lineup numbers look incredible for Boogie Flan. And again, we're still at small sample size theater. The numbers are only going to get better and better with each game, particularly but even before this game, the numbers were like saying Florida is a much, much better team on the floor with Flan than off it, and he was leading the Gators in on-off differential, suggesting that he had one of the most positive impacts on the team. If you want to throw it back to me later, Neil, I don't want to derail it too much here, but there's something on that note of lineup data and lineup combinations we should potentially talk about involving Flan. But whatever the case may be, I think that there was a lot of good stuff that was kind of showing up for Flan, particularly defensively. Still not as much on the offensive end, but I don't think it was as bad as people thought. And for him to have a performance like this, where it was obviously a massive breath of relief for him to go 3 for 6 from 3. But it's also like, if you imagine he didn't hit a single 3, he still would have been very effective with his ability to finally get downhill. And while he still struggles to finish at the rim, that's something that follows him. Him being able to get to those like balanced, like really short, like 12-foot pull-ups on like that was pretty big. No, I mean, I should say, if taking away his 3-point shots, like if you went 0 for 6, well, you're probably still looking at somewhat of a problem. But if you went 0 for 3 or whatever, you still would have been like, oh man, he was really effective in the way he was, getting to his shot and creating some tough ones. And obviously for him to get the steal and then finish in transition, I love to see that because I've been talking about his defense. But yeah, whatever the case may be, I don't love that it's been viewed as like, oh, he was terrible and now look at this breakout game, because I thought he was probably playing a lot better than perception was of him. Right. I have said it and I'll say it again. I do think he has played much better than Xavier Lee, and I think I would be in the heavy minority with that take, but I think that has been the case. And while you probably can't expect him to go shoot 3 for 6 from 3 every night, score 20 every night, I do think you can expect him to defend at that really high level every night. You're probably, I think like, while he's probably not going to play offensively like he did against Tennessee, he is still going to, like, he probably wasn't as bad as people thought when people thought he was bad. Maybe he's not going to be as good as we thought when we saw one game, but I still think, if it settles into him being someone who could hopefully hit like something more like 32 or 33% of his threes and do everything else the same, like this is still a really good player. And he also does bring that spurt ability. And I'm not saying this is a negative thing from like Xavier Lee, but like you saw when Xavier Lee started to kind of like break out of his funk a little bit, he had that kind of like throws his head back, sigh of relief, exhale, and then like smile. And that's something about his personality where like he could laugh at himself when things were not going great and keep things like that way. And it seemed like when he kind of like hit a 3 after being ice cold, he had that like breath of relief. Like Boogie Flan was like hit his first 3 and he's like, yeah, this is what I do. Like he was full confidence, like firing up the bench, firing up the crowd. Whether or not that's what that says, I mean, like it's 2 different personalities for sure, but it was kind of great to see that from him as well. But great performance. And again, I would also like just glad something we kind of showed a little bit on the Patreon in the post game is like, yeah, let's not forget his defense was also very, very good. In addition to the offensive explosion.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that, and you mentioned this, gosh, I don't even remember where you mentioned this, except that it was on the Patreon. So apologies to you for that. But our listeners, particularly,
there's so much Patreon content. I also don't remember what specifically is. Yeah.
Our Patreon subscribers will know what I'm talking about. But I asked Ty Golden about it today, and I should have clipped and saved the audio. Maybe I'll throw that on the Oklahoma preview. But you know, the last two games, Florida's just been really good defensively. Like, and I know that Georgia's guard has got into the lane a lot. They're going to do that against everyone. It's kind of what they do. And Wilkinson, kind of bothered ankle or no, really struggled with Boogie Flan as his primary defender. Jacoby Gillespie has his worst game in a Vols uniform with Boogie Flan as his primary defender. Georgia came into the O'Connell Center, soft schedule or no, leading the country in points per game average, fourth in points per possession average. They came out with a season low points per possession and a season low in points. Now, both those games are on Florida's home floor. We'll get to next week in a second. But getting back to what you said on the Patreon, like Florida sort of embracing the idea that they're going to win first and foremost with defense and rebounding this year. And like they might end up being a rock fight team. And if a guard has a great game like Boogie did or like Xavier did against UConn, like that's fine. That's not like conceding that this team can't go to the Final Four or that they can't go to the Elite Eight or wherever. To Eric's point, I think it was Eric on the Patreon that was like, Houston was basically a possession from being national champions, playing that way all year with multiple people, not just us on our podcast, talking about, I don't like anything they do offensively, what a mess they are, especially if LJ Cryer doesn't hit shots. This was, and they just started stacking wins because they embraced their identity. And I think now we will see, then that's where this week comes into play. We'll see if that's happened. But honestly, Florida defended pretty well against Missouri too, at least in my opinion. I'm interested in Eric's takes, but I feel like Missouri is a team that matches up pretty well with Florida, the way they're constructed. And still, you had Jacob Cruz hitting like a falling down turnaround on Thomas Houck. You had actually not a great possession for Boogie, but one that where he followed the scout maybe a little too much, sagging and leaves Ant Robinson open, but Robinson like banks in a three. And I think Flan thought he might drive, which that's fine. Florida did a really good job on Mark Mitchell. He had a quiet game, which is usually like if you're going to lose to Missouri, Mark Mitchell's going to have a big game. But I guess my point is Missouri hit a lot of tough shots against Florida, I thought. And I thought, Georgia, they didn't hit tough shots, and Florida really made them take a lot of tough shots. Blue Kane was another guy that Florida did a really nice job of neutralizing with multiple guys, Isaiah Brown, Thomas Houck. They threw different bodies at him pretty consistently. So I think the Gators are starting to get that. Todd Golden has told me, I think, multiple times to where I don't want to ask him now about competing because I feel like he gets annoyed. And it's not like you don't compete or try issue, but I do think like there's a difference between like competing and then understanding your like identity has to be defense. And I think Florida's starting to get that a little bit. And Boogie Flan is front and center to that in my view.
Yeah, like it's something that, man, if we want to go back to like talking about like we'll see what the listeners remember, like something I remember talking about in like 2018 on the podcast was how I thought that everyone kind of, I don't want to say overrates the center position when it comes to defense, but it just seems like when talking about like how good a defense can be, everyone looks like, oh, do you have like a center who can maybe protect the rim, can play pick and roll? Like that's really important. Don't get me wrong, but like the point guard has the ball the most in most teams' offenses. So like you better have someone who can defend that position. Like I think having a point guard that is good defensively is as important as anything if you want to make a conventionally good defense. That's one of the reasons that I went into last year being a little bit lower on the Gators than consensus. And obviously I was ultimately wrong, but one of my thoughts was like, they don't have that guy at point guard because I didn't think Walter Clayton was a great defender. And I thought that was going to be problematic. Now, ultimately it wasn't more problematic than than Walter Clayton's ability to hit a million shots and Florida to do everything they did. But I just think the value of a point guard defensively is very underrated because they're not like everyone. And the other thing too is everyone talks about like, oh, you need like switch. As soon as you start talking about like wing defenders, everyone's just like, oh, this guy's like so good. Like he can switch and that's great. But like, I'd rather have a guy who's like really good at locking down one position than pretty good at defending many or multiple. So that is where I do think that Boogie Flan's defense has just been, again, so underrated. And it's especially when you're looking at some of the problems Florida occasionally has defensively, such as having Xavier Lee, such as being pretty big and struggling in space sometimes just due to the nature of that size. And the fact they've been so good like that, a lot of that has to do with Ruben Chinyelu, who I think is just insanely improved on that end. Some of it is, of course, Thomas Houck, who's been incredible roaming off the ball. But I think that Boogie Flan has played such a massive role. And just to tie it back to what you were talking about, do you think that Missouri was doing good offensively or whatever? It's so interesting. And again, it's so funny. Like Florida could go like pace the entire game on their Twitter and like it doesn't matter, no one would like really pick it up because college basketball is so kind of set in their ways. But Missouri's the first team that has like made a conscious effort at picking on Xavier Lee. Like that was the first team that was like, oh, he's guarding Robinson. Oh, that guy is going and putting him in pick and roll, or we're getting him into a long closeout situation and he's driving Xavier Lee. Oh, and it was Jacob Cruz. They were posting him up and ducking him in. And it was just very clear that on every single possession, they were targeting Xavier Lee. And that is what a lot of teams around the world would do. And it just doesn't happen in college basketball. Like Georgia's going to do what Georgia does. Tennessee is going to do what Tennessee does. Doesn't matter if you're the 362nd or team in Ken Palm or Florida, like they're just going to do their same things. And that would be like, that's why I'm like not all that concerned because college teams, I just don't think do that. College coaches just like don't think about like playing those matchups as much. They think about like doing what they do and instilling their offensive culture. I thought what Missouri did was brilliant. I thought that they did an incredible job of picking on Florida. And it wasn't just Xavier Lee, had some really good opportunities for Mark Mitchell to go up against Alex Condon and Hanlogton, who are tall, but not quite as physical, and Houck at times as well when he played the four. So that was like a situation where I don't think that Florida defended poorly as much as I was really, really impressed with with Missouri's game plan, and ultimately good offense beats good defense. I don't have any problem with the way that Florida defended, while also just thinking that Missouri did really, really well. And I have no problem like talking about it, saying it. I just don't think that, I don't know when the SEC is going to look at that film and really embody it as much as like Missouri, if the Gators play them again. And I guess you could also say as well, like Missouri is one of the only teams that really actually has the size to kind of match up with Florida. And whether that be in the front court or they're putting like Cruz at 6'8" at the 2 and having a big size advantage over Lee. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just looking down the schedule right now and I don't, just with the way these coaches are and the way these teams play, I don't know if we're going to see that same kind of concentrated focusing on attacking Lee like we saw from Missouri. So it'll be pretty interesting if the Gators were to see an SEC tournament or deep in the NCAA tournament. Not that I think that Missouri will get there, but who knows? Missouri looked pretty darn good for a 56 Ken Palm team. But if the Gators see them again, I mean, man, that'll be really interesting to see how Florida does adjust, or to see Missouri likely go back to the same kind of strategy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of hard to, it's hard to argue with the teams that are deciding to attack Xavier Lee. I think, again, I think the UConn game was Lee's best game. I think initially, like UConn tried to do it too, and I just don't think Silas Demery played very well. But I think I think that's totally right. You mentioned Ruben Chinyelu. I think we kind of need to talk about him. I'm almost at a loss for words at just the sheer improvement, not just defensively, although the fact that he looks pretty darn comfortable guarding multiple spots on the floor and getting out on the perimeter and moving his feet is one thing. But now he's at 63% on his twos. He's arguably a better free throw shooter than Alex Condon is at this point. Like there are offensive improvements. I'm not picking on Condon, who's been really pretty darn good the last few games. I'm just saying that Chinyalu's been incredible. He's actually second on Florida in defensive win shares, if you value that stat. Tommy Houck is a little bit ahead of him in defensive win shares. They're both in the top 20 nationally, which I think is interesting. Florida has two guys in the top 20 in that category. Duke did that last year, but you don't see that all the time. Houston also did it last year. Houston only has one this year in Joe Tugler, who's second behind Josh Jefferson at Iowa State, who's freakish. The point is, like, Chinyalu is marvelous, but I love that, like, Tennessee kind of crept whatever they crept to Saturday 13, and then it just became the Ruben Chinyalu. This game really isn't getting any closer show, Fawcett. And I know you addressed some of it on the Patreon, but just your thoughts on his improvement and then that flourish at the end where he actually had JP Estrella and Jalen Carey on camera yelling at each other about who was going to guard him, which I thought was just fabulous camera work.
Yeah, I mean, the human victory cigar, we're just going to go to post ups on the left block over and over and over again for Chinyalu to go to right hand hook, and just Tennessee allowing it happening every single time. I thought it was truly hilarious. I thought it was objectively funny. But also the fact that he's able to do, it was one of those things that last year it felt like late stage, Shaq or those Oklahoma City teams with Kendrick Perkins, where they would give him the post up on the first possession of the game, and he would go and miss a sweeping hook from kind of outside the block, and they would just kind of give him his one to be hey, we're going to need you to really work in the trenches and rebound and grind all game. So Shaq used to say, if you don't, feed the big dog, he's not going to guard the house. And I just felt like that was kind of what the Gators did with Chinyalu last year, where they would give him his one or two post-ups that they just knew wasn't going to work. But it was one of those, give him those opportunities, let him, feel like he's contributing off, just doing that thing, 'cause they know that he's going to go and do all the work defensively, all the work on the glass, and to go see that now he is a legitimate threat and taking those that you could give him, 3 straight post-ups and he might just hit 3 straight hooks. And it's also another thing to me when I look at the way that some, younger post players are being developed. I'm man, if you're that size, you all you need is a right hook. Yes, it would be great to have one counter, but if you really if you're really that big and that strong and that long and your touch is good enough, you only need a right hook. Let's be real here. So thought that was really impressive. And yeah, defensively, I think that that's a place that he was overrated last year.
Yeah.
Because I think people saw his body and was just oh, this guy's got to be a great defender. Look at him. And again, he's just pretty heavy footed. Kind of anticipation wise, didn't see the game at a super high level. So he was a little slow reacting to things, and then he just wasn't that quick physically. And he was where again, you watch him guard the ball, you watch him switch right now, you watch him in pick and roll defense, you watch him sliding over and help defense. He is moving so much better. He's anticipating so much better. I'm sure I even said it as much on Patreon or the podcast. I thought he was a negative defender last year. Not saying it was a terrible negative, but I don't think he was a positive factor on that end. And he's a massive positive factor on that end. He is, you could make an argument for the best defender on the floor for the Gators for a defense that is really, really good. So yeah, I am really impressed, and, taking it full circle just because people know that was a take that I wasn't a huge fan of necessarily when the Gators got him. Obviously it's turned out to be I didn't, I just was this is the fourth big on Washington State. Are we this guy's going to start, and then for him to well, again, while I probably still wasn't as high in his game last year as a lot of people were, the Gators obviously had some good chemistry, won the championship. Like this year, I think he is so much better than last year. I think he is, just considerably better in so many ways, even down to the fact that you probably wouldn't have thought he'd be able to rebound the ball any better than he did the year before. And now he's, still staying strong in double digits, averaging rebounds. Like that's also remarkable for something. Like how could he even get better there? And he somehow has. So just incredible improvement there.
Yeah, no. And I again, I didn't want to take anything away from Alex Condon, although I will say that at some point I didn't watch the game live the other day, so we were on a tape delay or whatever, TiVo, whatever you call it, and Alex Condon shooting a threes, and my wife noticed that I painfully grimace when Kondo launches from the perimeter, and so, like, here's what I'll say about that, because I don't think he's actually 15% bad, but I do think he's, like, not getting the sort of clean looks he was getting last year when Florida had Walter Clayton Jr. and, like, one of the best cutters in the country and Will Richard, and defenses sort of collapsed whenever those guys got in the paint, and sometimes that left Alex Condon extremely open. And I think people are flying at him, especially with him playing the 4, whereas last year a lot of that time was at the 5. And I guess the point I'm making is he's gotten better offensively in other areas. I mean, his free throw rate is the best on the team. 66.7 is a elite rate. He is really, I think, way better than he's ever been sort of in mid-post isolation. Especially if he gets to his right hand, I think he attacks really aggressively, but it's like it used to be like Kondo would try to get to his right hand and maybe he'd drop step, or maybe he'd like have a duck in where he could get a layup on the right hand. I mean, he's added sort of a spin move, and his footwork is, I think, incredible. He had a wonderful testament to your footwork layup late in the Tennessee game where I think Jay Billis about fell out of his chair. So Alex Condon is still really good. And I mean, he's still an incredible shot blocker. His rebounding and offensive and defensive rebounding percentages are both nationally ranked per KenPom. Like, he's having a pretty good season. I think two things are happening in that regard. Like, because I still see some bad takes on Kondo, like, oh, I don't know, he's overrated. And it's like, well, it's not his fault. He was preseason All-American. And, he's not hitting threes. So I think the combination of those things ignores a lot of the good things he's doing. And I just wanted to identify those largely because, I think obviously Chinyelu and Houck are incredible stories, but it really the whole front court has just been really good, like we thought they would be.
Yeah, Condon taking a lot of, slander for sure for someone still averaging like 15-9 with like 4 assists, leading the way.
Right, the best passer on the team.
Like if you like blind resumed so many front court players, and if you said like, hey, would you sign up for 15 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 blocks, 0.7 steals, and like 43% from the field? You could even add in the 15.2% from 3. Don't need to hide that. I mean, like 99 out of 100 programs would be like, oh yeah, we would pay what Condon is making or more for that production. So it is the quietest. I mean, I don't know for sure. I shouldn't just throw this out without looking, but I'm going to imagine one of the quietest 15, 9, and 4s in the country. While again, I do think his defense is also really good. I was happy to see him have one of his patented block a guy trying to dunk on him. Swats, that was big, but it's like, I think the thing with Condon is like, I feel like he was the face of a couple of the outside of the guards. He was kind of the face of some of those early Florida losses because he did have some rough turnovers that I thought were like pretty uncharacteristic for him.
Yeah.
And then you look in the recent weeks, then the 3-point shot has just betrayed him. And like, let's be honest too, it probably doesn't help that not only is he 5 for 33 from 3, but like the misses have been really rough. Like a lot of them look pretty pretty bad. So that's something that but I think when you just add like in spite of that, the fact that he's still very efficiently scoring 15 points per game when you like don't even really notice him. He's still, I would say, Florida's best transition front court player. He is still rebounding the ball at an elite level. Again, if not for Chinyelu being even better, people would be talking about like, oh my goodness, like Alex Conn is rebounding the hell out of the ball. I do think that maybe Bielis or Schulman made the comment that he was just like, hey, this actually like Florida's leading assist getter, which obviously assists are kind of like not a perfect stat, but I do think but in his case, when he's not a point guard and it doesn't seem like he has the ball a ton, for him to have those raw assist numbers shows that he is, finding ways to be crafty, usually finding guys for 2-point looks or like, again, there's not a lot of assists to be had with 3-point looks for the Gators right now. So I think that's really impressive. I just say, so I'd very much echo that. I thought that, or the fact that Conan has been much better than expected. And I would also even say too, I mean, I talked about how many teams in the country would sign up for that. I bet if with Florida fans, if before the season we said, would you sign up for 14.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists? Would you sign up, 1.4 blocks, 1.7, whatever it is, like, would you sign up for that? Like, I think people would still want the McDonald's or the All-American, not the McDonald's All-American, the All-American, which those numbers would probably suggest not at all. But I think like reasonably with everything else, people would have signed up for that. So I feel bad for him not getting probably the flowers he has, but and I think the biggest thing too is there's still been some question about like down the stretch. Even there's still some times where it's like, okay, like what guards want to play, even though Ruben Chinyelu has been really good. There's times where I think it's like, okay, like who do we like? Should we play him at the 5? Like, but you know that Hauk's going to be on the floor. You know that Condon's going to be on the floor. Like whether or not that's the 3-4, the 4-5, that speaks to Condon as well. So that'd be my take on Condon. Really, really good performance so far this year, honestly.
Well, we're halfway through the season. And that means we're getting closer to March Madness. So I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor over at MyBookie. If you are getting ready for March Madness like the rest of us, get on mybookie.ag. Use the code Neil500 and you will actually get a bonus for signing up. It's called a bet back bonus. It works like this. Once you claim it and you enter that code, you opt in. On your bet slip, it's basically bet insurance. So if your first bet does not win, like you say you bet an over on a Mike White team, you can get your money back up to $500 with only a one-time rollover. So that's a pretty good deal from the guys over at MyBookie. There is a link that we will post on both the Patreon and on the Spotify intro to this podcast page, just so that you guys can use it if you want, or you can just go to mybookie.ag, sign up using the code Neil500, and you can join. Lastly, on Condo, I wanted to ask Fawcett this because I ran a couple races this weekend, and at least for the bulk of the 10K, I was listening to Fawcett on the Rising Basketball Coaches podcast, and it made me think, getting ready for this show tonight made me think of Alex Condon and then said, you know what? I haven't put Fawcett on the spot in a pod in a while. So, like, here is the question, because Eric talked a lot about, modern offense and, Alex probably is going to need to shoot the 3 better to play for a long time in the NBA. I don't think that's a hot take. Maybe not, but I think so. And maybe once he's fully professional, he'll just get better at it. That happens to a lot of players. But in your view, kind of knowing what you know about the way that offense is run in the NBA or the way that offense is run at a high level in Europe where Alex can make a lot of money, where is he right now in terms of because he's going to be staring down the barrel of, and it's not a Tommy Hawk situation where he's older. Like, he didn't take a year off. So, the difference, the way draft people are going to treat him at 22 or 21 isn't a ton different, but he probably have an opportunity to make $2.5-3 million if he plays at Florida next year.
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, not to speak this, maybe people be mad for me to speak in existence. I think you can clearly make more than that. I bet. So that's kind of the floor. And I also think even too, and this is something I think I even mentioned last year when it was people were talking about like, should Condon go to the draft? Should he come back? And I think I mentioned, I was like, if I'm Condon and I looking at the market, I would have done something very creative. And I would have said, I'm signing like a LeBron 1+1 deal. I'm doing 1 year and then a player option. The first year is going to be 2.5 million. The second year is going to be 3.5. And there'd be language where it would say, I will never enter the transfer portal unless there's a coaching change or something like that. But like Golden, if you are still the coach at Florida and I play in college, it will it will be at Florida. You will never have to worry. Just like how like people might remember, or people might not realize this, but like JT Toppin, very kind of heralded, like people know that he came back to Texas Tech for a ton of money. It also happened very early. He was presented a contract, and like I think people talk, and I think some people talk about like, oh, like, you know, oh, he's making this number, but like he's really good, but like, did they have to pay him enough? Like one of the reason that he made so much is because he said on the first day he's coming back, he didn't test the waters. He said like, I'm coming back. Now I wouldn't necessarily do that if I was Condon on the first, but like I would just like that kind of thing that says like, there is language in my contract that you will never have to worry about me playing for another college basketball team. It'll be at Florida or it'll be in the NBA. So I think, you know, that's something I would have done if it was like something fun and creative last year. Obviously that's not going to happen now. He would have one more year, but I do think there's something to be said. And this is, you know, I see this all the time, like the league I coach in, Canadian Elite Basketball League, where there's all kinds of guys that have had their cup of coffee in the NBA. A lot of guys who've had that first contract. It's just so challenging to get that second one. And the just statistically speaking, most guys don't get to a second contract. So if I'm Condon banking, let's say 2.5 million, I think it could be a lot more, but let's just use that number because that's one he might be happy to come back to Florida at. If he goes back, like his, just statistically speaking, whatever he makes in his 2 or 3 or maybe 4-year deal is entry level in the NBA. Like just statistically speaking, it's not going to be another one after that. So banking another year at 2.5 million. And then, you know, I hope he has a long and illustrious career, but just like the numbers are that's not the case. Like I really think that there is a very valid reason and a very valid argument that Florida could make and just say like, hey, like come bank 2.5 or 3, whatever it is. And like, it's, you're only going to be more ready for the start of your NBA career. And then you could, then you try to make sure you play as well, as good as possible right away and position yourself to be in a rotation and get yourself in position to get that second contract or that extension, whatever the case may be. I also don't, like on the whole, like does he need to shoot? I'm not as much the like, oh, he needs to shoot, but I think he needs to do one of two things at a really high level. He needs to be someone who's a very good face up, attack the rim player, or a really good 3-point, or a capable 3-point shooter. He has not proven himself to be a capable 3-point shooter. I also would say I do not think he is an NBA, you know, face up and drive guy. So that would be, I think he would have to be much better at one of those things. He would be closer to being a better attacking guy. But I do think his defense, I do think he also needs to get a little bit more positionally strong. He still has the Mark Mitchells of the world and the like that give him a lot of trouble from a physicality standpoint. So, you know, being stronger, but still using his instincts to be a tremendous defender. And we know he can move the ball and be a connective piece offensively. I still am like, I'm still a bot. Like, I still think that he'll be I think he'll be a capable NBA player, maybe get to that second deal. I don't think it's as easy as, or simple as just like, you've got to shoot or not. But like, hey, I know some people might like try to use that as a case to like, oh, you can't have shot the 3, I better come back to Florida. I think it's more like which could be part of it, but I think there's a very reasonable financial kind of framework for why like the career for Condon could very well be 2.5 at Florida, if not more. 3 years at the NBA, maybe he makes $6 million total, doesn't get that next deal. Then he goes back to Australia and makes 200,000 for 10 years. And like, that's pretty darn good career earnings.
Yeah,
And
no
still
doubt.
a bulk of that coming on the front end. He seems like a smart guy who could, I don't think I don't see him walking up in a whatever diamond plated gold chain or whatever. So yeah, I think that he could still have a very good career just by locking in. That's the other thing too, and being Australian with the pro league there that doesn't pay huge money, but it pays solid money. But because he's Australian, doesn't use an import spot, like he could play for as long as he wants in the Australian league, making six figures, not high six figures, but solidly. So if he wants to, if he leaves, 5 million total, however you want to get to that number in a couple of years at Florida, then an NBA entry level, and he's got a nice way to start, even if he doesn't get that second contract, go play in the NBL in Australia, have a lengthy career there where he'd be fantastic.
Well, that's great stuff. Not going to get much of that anywhere else. I'm going to be real honest. These are not types of assessments of players that come on a lot of podcasts. Check out Eric on the Rising Coaches podcast. The guys that host that, Adam Gordon and Brendan Goebel, do an incredible job. I love listening. Eric was super interesting on it as usual. But also, one of our themes has always been learn more about basketball by listening to our show. That's a show where you will undoubtedly learn something almost every week if you tune in. And it's like 35 to 50 minutes, whatever. So great stuff. Make sure you check that out. We are going to get into this week. I think it's low. I hate doing this. I don't want to say it's the biggest week of Florida season. I guess what I'll say is if Florida wants to win the SEC championship, they absolutely have to win one of these two games. And oddly, maybe the one that you could more afford to lose, if that's a thing, is tomorrow against Oklahoma. So let's preview Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, who Florida will play Saturday. All our previews brought to you by our sponsors at Game Time Sidekicks. They have a ton of incredible stuff. They have every SEC school. So if you're a Vanderbilt or Oklahoma fan, drop it in, which has become an increasing thing on our pod. They have your schools too. I've got some actual great tumblers from them. It's just like a Yeti. It's going to keep things hot, keep things cold. They look nice. They have national championship designs. Check out the guys over at GameTimeSidekicks.com. Oklahoma, interesting team, Fawcett. I write about the league, the SEC at Saturday Down South, so I have a weekly column. Hopefully people check that out occasionally. I think it's pretty good. And Oklahoma is one of the teams I don't know what to do with because I think they're better than their record. Like, they run good offense, first of all. Their offensive metrics against quad one, their metrics are better than against quad two. But, they don't grade out terribly on Torvik against quads 1 and 2. They're unbeaten at home. Nigel Pack is the Carson Beck of college basketball. He's been playing college basketball since 2019. He's been to the Final Four. Remember, he got that $800,000 NIL deal, and it was the whole world was going to collapse. Those were the days. Xavier Brown from St. Joe's is a kid whose game I really like. Honestly, I would have taken a look at him if I were a coach in the SEC. I think he's a good basketball player. They've got kind of a weird Jacob Cruzy sniper that's 6'9", Qualitat, who or what's his name? ATAC. What did I say? Sorry about that. And I just think they're kind of good. And I don't know why they're 0-3 in the SEC. I'm confused by it, or 1-2 in the SEC. And, they rout a team like Wake Forest that's played everybody close. And then, they struggle anywhere that isn't Norman otherwise. It's just a hard team to figure out, except it's a team that can shoot. And Florida's biggest problem this season has been disciplined teams that execute. So some scaries for me, I think, headed into this one.
Yeah, Nigel Pack, like, can you believe that he's making $400,000 a year at Miami? Like,
that's what it was, 400,000.
It was a 2-year deal for 800.
Okay,
so he had that, which is also funny because it was one of the first NIL deals ever announced. It was a 2-year deal, and then suddenly like people got away from multi-year deals largely. Which so actually some vision from yeah, I won't say any names over there, but people know the regular figures. Yeah, I mean Nigel Pack is like. I don't know enough about college football to know the exact comparison other than if it's just an age thing. But one of the things about Pack is like he has been so consistent over 6 years. Like he is just like 14 points a game, no matter what. Doesn't matter if he's at Kansas State. Doesn't matter if he's at Miami. Doesn't matter if he's at Oklahoma. Like he just has been like consistently like a rock solid scorer. So it's one of those things that like and I kind of feel like he was underrated in the portal because he's like not sexy, but like I said, how like,
yeah,
you would have been smart to sign up for 15-9 from Alex Condon. Like, I think a lot of teams would have been smart to just look at Nigel Pack and just been like, hey, like we can get this guy and it's like a guaranteed 15-4 and he's going to do it efficiently. His shooting has gone to another level this year. Like I actually do think you can make somewhat of an argument that he's been the best shooter in college basketball this year, which is not being talked about, but 7.5 attempts per game and he's hitting 45% of them. And as a point guard, this is like coming off screens, pulling up off movement. Like he shot the ball incredibly well. And then, yeah, I do think also, like you mentioned, Xavier Brown, like that was another guy, Xavier Brown, sorry, that was very underrated in the portal. A guy that could have 2 years to play. He was at St. Joseph's, who just had 2 like really solid seasons, I thought. And he's like really physical downhill guard. He doesn't, or like, well, I guess he actually has shot it great in his career. Hasn't shot it well this year, but yeah, I've always really liked his game, and maybe teams didn't think he was bursty enough, but he's been really solid as well. But something about Oklahoma, like if you go back 2 years, preseason KenPom 48, they finished 46th. Last year preseason 40th in KenPom, they finished 40th. This year preseason in KenPom, they were 58th. They're currently 54th. Like they are just rock solid mid. Like they're good. They're not super talented, but they're not. They have some interesting pieces. Yeah, it's really interesting too. Like Porter Moser is like always been known as a defensive guy, but the last 2 years they've been really good offensively, haven't been able to guard. Yeah, it's a team that has always kind of struggled to get the big win the last couple of years, but has always had a good floor. And I just feel like they are just locked into being somewhere between, like, again, like I said, 56th right now or 54th, sorry, in KenPom.
Right.
I think they're probably more like 45th. To my eye KenPom test, but whatever the case may be, they look like yet another bubbly team that I think doesn't make the tournament, because the SEC I don't think will be 13 teams this year, but they are solid, and I think the fear is they can slow things down if they can make it a half-court game. Their shooters are still much more proven than Florida's. If it comes to it, we've seen obviously Florida be on the wrong side of some of these tight games because of their struggles in late game execution. If this does stay close, this would be another team that I would, like Oklahoma, I think would have the edge. If you were like, if you said this is a tie game with 2 minutes left, I'm probably saying I think that Oklahoma wins, but I actually do think it's more likely that Florida Georgia's it and wins more like by double digits, maybe not as much as Georgia, but I do think the Gators handle this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting team. I didn't mention Darian Reed, who I think is super talented, that they got from Alabama, right? And like, he's a fascinating player. But yeah, Xavier Brown, came over from a St. Joe's team that I think was one of the first 4 out because they lost their conference tournament final, and the A-10 ended up being a one big league. And like, Brown led the team in scoring, and they had a guy named Rasheer Fleming, who I think was the first pick of the second round, right? And their second leading scorer. Now, he was a kind of a stretchy big guy, but the point is, like, they've got a bunch of guys that can play. They're kind of old. They're going to run good stuff. They're going to make Thomas Houck. He's been better at it, certainly the last couple weeks, really since Madison Square Garden, running around, chasing around screens. They set a ton of them. They run clean offense. They don't turn the ball over. Florida's going to be challenged. Their huge advantage is size. And they're much bigger. They're going to rebound better. I think if Urban Klavzar, who's been banging down shots, continues to do that, if they get a good game from Boogie Flan, they should survive. But certainly a scary and not by any means guaranteed game against Oklahoma tomorrow night out in Norman. And then Saturday, undefeated Vanderbilt. There were 3 writers in the SEC media ballot. 3 writers in the SEC media ballot who picked Vanderbilt in their top 5 in the SEC. Those writers were me, Will Warren, and Blake Lovell.
Amazing.
So, do we get the Ball Award? Those guys are the Commodores are good, man. They're fun to watch. They aren't very big, but they have like Devin McLaughlin, who is like just moves people and does everything and guards 5 spots and is going to be on the All SEC defensive team. And they really contest shots on the perimeter. They chase you, they turn you over a little bit. Tyler Tanner's playing like an All-American, and Florida never plays well there. And I'm sure the building will be filled to the rafters with the reigning national champs coming in. So your thoughts on Vanderbilt and what you've seen so far?
Yeah, Vanderbilt has been the most fun team to watch in the country this year, at least to my eye. I have absolutely loved watching them through non-conference play, through the start of SEC play. They are such an enjoyable watch, and I think some of that charm comes from the fact that they're so undersized, as you mentioned, and like undersized in the truest sense. Like sometimes you see a team that like their 5-man is like undersized, but like, and like will be like 6'8", and then people will be like, oh, they're undersized, but you look at that like across the wing, they're like 6'8", 6'8", 6'5", whatever. But like they are undersized at every position. And Jalen Washington would be their one like good positional size guy, like Tyler Nick, I guess to an extent, a skilled wing, but like they are generally playing 6'7", 220 at center, and they are playing 6 foot 160 Tyler Tanner at point guard. And Tyler Tanner, again, he is the conductor behind this offense that I think is the super fun, most fun offense to watch in the country. For him to be kind of like, you watch him and he's both like super smooth while also being super explosive. Like you just kind of watch him and he's playing at his pace. He's like shifting the defense with his eyes. He'll have like a really smooth dribble combination, but then he'll also go up and dunk on someone. And he finishes really well at the rim for someone who's like, we've talked a lot around Florida about the struggles for small guards to finish around the rim, and he's smaller than Florida's guys and finishes at a super high level. They run really complex stuff. They really will like call a set every time down the floor, which I know is like less trendy in the days of like wanting to play, everyone wanting to talk about playing through concepts and playing freely. But it's one of those things that like they also play fast because they get to spots and get into their stuff really, really quickly. So I have loved everything about Vanderbilt. Again, like I said, that is like, if you just asked me who is the team you've enjoyed watching the most this year across college basketball, it would be Vanderbilt. Like, taking the Florida perspective out of this, taking just like the college basketball view, this is fascinating because all year long, everyone has been watching Vanderbilt win games. They're 16-0. Forget if we mentioned that so far. Not that they have a ton of marquee wins. The best team they beat is Alabama, but throughout the entire year, they beat UCF, they beat VCU, they beat St. Mary's, they beat SMU, they beat Memphis, they beat Wake Forest, they got into SEC play, they beat South Carolina, Alabama, LSU. The entire time, everyone has always said, oh, but they're so small. And they still have like magically found a way to like not run into any teams with great size, including even their start to the SEC season. So Florida's for a team that has like not really had to prove themselves against like, are they going to have problems with size? Like now they run into Florida. So I really do think, just like objectively speaking, the way that like the college basketball world review this game, like everyone is going to be watching this, trying to see can Vanderbilt handle a team with a ton of size. Is this something that is going to be, sustainable for Vanderbilt if they were to go on an NCAA tournament run? Because now they're looking like a Final Four team. Could they beat like the Floridas, the Tennessees, the Houston, the rock fight tier of teams that I always reference? That'll be fascinating. But that's also a reason why I think that just like everyone's eyes are going to be on this game. Everyone has loved watching Vanderbilt, but everyone wants to know what they're going to do against a team like Florida. But and even actually tying things back to Oklahoma, like Duke Miles was at Oklahoma last year and he was like aggressively mediocre. And like no one, like was able to like he was really like just an afterthought. Like he was the most like NPC guard in the SEC where he wasn't bad. Like he was good enough to start, but like not good enough to make much of an impact. Like he just existed. He just like was the most like existed guard in the SEC, and now he has been tremendous at Vanderbilt. So I can't speak enough about Byington. This might be the last time we see him coaching in Nashville. This might be another situation where he might be like kind of the next guy to take whatever big job kind of opens. Yeah. But I am very excited for this one. While I'm like a huge Vanderbilt fan, I do have some concerns about their lack of size, and that's where Florida could kind of bludgeon them. But Neil, I actually do think this comes full circle a little bit because we were talking about Florida's defense like an hour ago to start the podcast, and we're talking about how they like have done really well in recent weeks, but I think like they defended okay against like UConn, but not great. And of course, UConn does that to a whole lot of teams. Like that's not like Florida did poorly necessarily, but as Florida has played better, they've defensively or played really good recently. They've done it against teams that they're like just perfectly suited to guard. And the next challenge would be like, okay, can they really lock down a team that like runs great stuff?
Right.
And they will now have that challenge against Vanderbilt. So we'll see exactly like this will be a great test for Florida's defense. And it's going to be a great test for Vanderbilt to see, can they deal with like a brute force team? I think this is like one of the games, probably the SEC game regular season game I'm most excited for the Gators.
I'm trying to think of, I think I agree with that. The only tall team they played is St. Mary's, to which I will say two things.
Right.
One, Vanderbilt won by like 40. I think it was 25. Two, like, I don't think this St. Mary's team is as good as most of Randy Bennett's teams. I know they're 16-2. I get it. They don't have a Kim Pom top 100 win. I think Davidson has just fallen out of the top 100. So, like Paulius Moraskis is awesome, but that's kind of what they got. Like Andrew McKeever, like with all due respect to him, he's not Ruben Chinyelu. You know what I mean? Like it's just a different brand of athleticism and basketball player. And that really is somehow, to Eric's point, like the one team that Vanderbilt has played that has great size so far. I mean, shoot, even Alabama is kind of a hot mess in the front court. Now, LSU has good positional size, but even them, like their best big, Jalen Reed, is unfortunately yet again out for the season. So, talk about a guy, Matt McMahon is the new Mike White. Like he cannot get a break with a player staying healthy, that he needs to absolutely be healthy for his team to be good. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this this week for Florida, because to me, like, again, I think Florida's floor is terrific and very high. Like Florida is almost certainly going to be in like the second round of the NCAA tournament. The question for Florida is like, are they just a second weekend team where they get to the Sweet 16 and they'll need the matchup to break right? Or are they a team that's going to go to the second weekend playing as a protected seed somewhere and have a shot at going back to the Final Four? And like, so the next step for Florida is to win one of these big, any road game, but to win games on the road and play closer to the team. They're never going to play like they do at home. No one does really, but playing more like a team that can win anywhere, last year they could do that because they had the ultimate equalizer in shot making, right? Like Walter Clayton Jr. And Urban Klabsar could rain in 11 threes in the jungle, and Florida could run away from even Auburn on their home floor. They don't have that this season, so they're going to have to do it other ways. And, tomorrow they're going to have to do it by guarding the three-point line, I think. And, either limiting attempts or limiting makes, one or the other, hopefully both. But and then Vanderbilt, they're going to have to dominate on the glass. So if they do those things, they're going to have a chance to get this split that I think they need to compete for the SEC championship. Because after this week, kind of wrapping on this, Fawcett, like it's LSU at home, Auburn at home. You feel pretty good about home games if you're Florida, to be honest. And then you have South Carolina away, where Florida never really plays well, but that's not a great team. And then you have Alabama at home, tricky, but certainly a quad one type opportunity. But until February 7th, when they go back on the road for a whole week and play at Texas A&M, at Georgia, like you almost feel like if they get through this week, it could be a pretty long winning streak, to be honest.
Like right off the top of the discussion about these last two games, you said something along the lines of like this being the biggest week for Florida. And I was like, That can't be true. And as you were talking, I pulled up their schedule. And I just I know we've talked so many times about how Florida got a favorable SEC schedule. It's just every time I look at it, I cannot believe how favorable it is. When as soon as you were like, this is Florida's biggest week of the season, I'm like, that cannot be true, Neil. And then I was like, oh, they just do not have every single, right. Like you said, their hardest game left is Alabama at home. Alabama is a bunch of mid-major players and Arkansas. An incredible coach and an incredible, leading scorer in LeBaron Filant. It just you could not have while remaining within the rules of scheduling in the SEC, you just couldn't really make Florida's schedule any easier than it is without being so. You do look at that and you say this if Florida gets through Vanderbilt, you're looking at a hefty run and it's just to get the possibilities are all there. I know that the non-conference was not as good as Florida would have hoped. They really do have every opportunity to do something incredible here during league play, and it is one of those things. It's if this if it doesn't happen for the Gators, if the wheels fall off here, man, they just had every opportunity to go on around. Now I will also say, for many people listening to this, I'm sure will follow Evan Miyakawa on Twitter, as the Evan Mia analytics tool that probably many of us also look at. He does a thing where he's constantly trying to call team seeds throughout the season, as early as he's been doing it for weeks, and just using his metrics to kind of predict how the rest of the season will go and say what seed they think a team will be. And he doesn't do it a ton. He does it when he figures that he has a good yes, and has been, pretty accurate with it. If you're looking at last year, he had one for Florida last week. He was just I'm declaring it Florida's a 5 seed. I think that might be right. I think that probably if we were really setting the betting line and we really wanted to try to make it as tough as possible, you might say 4.5, or you might say right on 4 and give people a chance to push.
Yeah.
I think that, with the lack of ability to, and again, this isn't even to say that Florida is a 5th seed just in terms of talent quality, but you just look at from a resume piece, they don't have as many good games on the schedule as a lot of other teams do. And we'll see if they absolutely run the table, what's possible. But I do feel the 5 seed call from Evan might be pretty accurate. And then that kind of that 5 seeds that that fun spot where you're going to play a 12 that's plucky, but we think that Florida's going to, still be able to handle, even we've talked about Florida's floor. We think it's pretty high, but then you're in that spot where no one's surprised if a 5 seed gets to a Sweet 16 and beyond, but also 5 seed losing in the round of 32 isn't unheard of as well. So sometimes I look at those predictions from Evan and I'm kind of I might chuckle at them, whatever. I looked at for Florida and I'm Yeah, that's pretty good. So we'll also revisit that and see if he was able to call Florida's seat on like January 9th, or I don't remember when he actually tweeted it, but we'll see. But I thought it was actually like he said it, and I'm like, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, I think the goal is probably to make sure they're playing in Tampa in the first weekend.
Yes.
And so if they were 5 seed, they would not be, because they'd have to be protected. So they've got to get to that 4 spot. Now, a good way to get a 4 is to go grab a quad 1A at Vanderbilt. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Remember, a couple years ago, Florida went up to Memorial Gym and played a terrible Vanderbilt team, lost, and it cost them a seed line. And then they ended up playing a hot Colorado team and went out in round 1. So a house of horrors for Florida basketball teams for multiple decades. Will that change Saturday? We will see. Gary Parrish has already called his shot, pointing out that Vanderbilt will not lose a game until March at least, on his podcast today. So Gary is gone from picking Vanderbilt 11th in the league to being all in on the Commodores. And all I can say to him is welcome to the wagon. I'll let Fawcett sign us off.
Go Gators and keep attacking closeouts.